Welcome back to our channel. We had 3 wins and 2 losses from yesterday's video. We did, however, add a late play which took a hit, leaving us with 3 wins and 3 loses. Now let's delve into the action-packed lineup for today. Our first game is between the Nets and Magic. The game total is looking good based on the stats, dominating with all stats. With 82% season coverage and 70% in both matchups and recent form, this is the way we would lean. For the spread, it's much more closer. The stats prefer the Nets clearly, but I'm not sure I do. Either way for me would result in alternate markets, and that could be with both teams. Like the game total, Nets team total also highly prefers to go over the line provided. They have managed over an 80% cover rate for all our categories, making this one look solid. The Magic's team total isn't as appealing. As you can see, they clearly favor going over for the season, yet the other 2 categories are 60/40ths, favoring them going under their line. For me, I'd give this one a miss. For our player, we went with Dennis Schroeder to stay under 2.5 assists, low number I know. He has stayed under in 4 of his last 5 games. As you can see, his season cover rate is above 50%, it's his matchups that look worrying. Yet, diving into his most recent 4 games against Magic, he has stayed under in 3 of them. It also helps knowing Orlando are ranked first in rebounds against. Next up we have the Raptors and Pistons game. The game total is looking a little even on my opinion. This would definitely have to be alternate lines to even consider a bet. If I did, I would be looking to strengthen the understats as it's already a high game total. Moving on to the spread, the only consideration would have to be the Raptors. Sure, their recent form is way off, only covering in one of their last 5 games. Yet a 78% coverage in matchups does boost our confidence. Just comparing the stats to the Pistons, you can probably see why we have this preference. For the Raptors game total, again we prefer the look of them staying under. The stats slightly favor this, but it's close in all categories. Again, this could be one to take to the alternative markets. Same goes for the Pistons game total. We obviously favor them staying under their line, and the stats back this up. They also have a 78% cover rate for matchups, 80% for recent form. Although the season is almost even, both teams preferring to stay under also helps when considering the game total. For our player, we went with Jaden Ivey to have over 3.5 assists. As you can see, his stats are looking solid, hitting over in every single game against the Raptors. He has hit this in 3 of his last 4 games, 4 of his last 5 home games, and had an exact even score for the season. The Raptors ranked 27th in assists against, helping this one look a little better. We also went for Emmanuel Quickley to stay under 14.5 rebounds and assists. If it wasn't for his recent form, this line probably wouldn't exist. He never hits it, yet of late, he has destroyed it. Either way, it's hit in 14 of his last 17 games, while also hitting in all 7 games against the Detroit. Now for the Bulls versus Pacers. The game total slightly prefers them to stay under their line, hitting 60% of the time for both head-to-heads and recent form. The season coverage is a little less comfortable, hitting under in only 45% of this season's games. Again, it's another one to maybe consider alternative lines. The Bulls to cover their spread looks much better than the Pacers, especially when looking at the stats. They have managed this 60% of their matchups in recent form, while it sits at 57% for the season. Again, comparing this to the Pacers stats, you can clearly see the difference. Like most bets with this game, the Bulls team total is also looking too even to consider. The stats are slightly in favor of them going over the line provided, yet we are not comfortable with it. Like basically everything in this game, it could be one for the alternative markets. The same goes for the Pacers game total. It's most likely one for alternate lines at most. This season they clearly prefer to go over their line, yet recent form and head-to-heads don't back this stat up. Let's move on to the Nuggets and Heat game. The game total is looking good to go over this line, especially when considering their recent form. They have managed to go over in 90% of their last 5 games, while also managing it in nearly 70% of the season. You do have to consider the matchups though. Only managing to hit over in 40% of games between the 2. For the spread, we only see one winner here. The Nuggets have a solid cover rate across the board, managing 90% in matchups, 80% in their last 5 games, and a decent 63% for the season. Heat have managed their line 60% of the time for both recent form and this season. Looking at the Nuggets team total, we do prefer them to go over. Sure, in matchups they only manage this 40% of the time, but when considering their 80% recent form and 72% for the season, it looks the only way to go. Maybe strengthening the head-to-head stats with alternate line may boost your confidence with this one. For the Heat game total, it's one we will stay away from. They have managed to go over this line 80% of the time when looking at recent form. Their season hit rate is also at a 66% cover rate. It's the matchups again that are looking the weakest. Our player pick for this one is Nikola Jokic to have over 45.5 points, rebounds, and assists. His stats are looking comfortable, as you can see. He has hit over in 4 of his last 5 games, also in 5 of the 7 matchups against Miami. He has also managed this in all 4 of his latest away game. Now for the Hornets and Grizzlies game. They have gone over this line in all games between the two, while they also have gone over in 80% of the season, and same goes for recent form. This is the only way I would consider going with this one. Looking at the spread, it does look a lot better for the Grizzlies when considering the stats. They have managed to cover their spread 60% of the time for both head-to-heads and recent form. It does obviously drop significantly for the season cover rate, yet it's still head and shoulder about every stats for the Hornets. Looking at the Hornets team total, again we suggest concentrating on the over market. It's not the strongest by a long way when considering the stats, yet again they are far superior in hitting over their line than they are staying under. We will look to strengthen the stats before considering a bet. It's almost the same for the Grizzlies team total. Both have 60% plus for recent form and season cover rate, yet the Grizzlies have managed to go over this line in all games against the Hornets. Again, you could look to strengthen this one. Now for the Cavaliers and Pelicans matchup. The stats for the game total suggest these two prefer to hit over the line provided. They have managed to go over this line 70% of the time in both season and recent form, while the head-to-head falls slightly below, covering in 60% of their games. The spread is one I also suggest giving a miss, unless considering alternate markets. Sure, the Cavs managed to cover in 80% of games between the two, but the Pelicans have them beat in recent form, covering in all but one of their last 5 games. You do have to pass the torch back to the Cavs when looking at the season, covering in 72% of their games compared to the Pelicans' 42%. The Cavaliers' team total is 1 for the alternative markets in my opinion. It's way too even for the recent form and matchups, even with a high 85% cover rate for the season, favoring them to hit over this line. And it's the exact same for the Pelicans. Sure, we favor them hitting over their line. How could we not with the 80% cover rate for recent form and 70% in this season games? But look at the matchups, a measly 20%. We would definitely have to boost this stat just to consider a bet. Our player pick in this game is Jonas Valanciunas to have over 10.5 rebounds and assists. Taking a look at his stats, they are far from the strongest, yet he has managed to cover in 4 of his last 4 games, 4 of his last 5 home games, and of course 4 and 5 games against the Cavaliers. Now for the Warriors and Mavericks game. The game total is another one to consider looking at other available lines. They managed to stay under this line 70% of the time when facing one another, yet the other 2 categories are almost even. Looking into the spread, we prefer the look of the Warriors covering their line. They have managed this in 69% of the games between the two, also 60% in recent games, while they have a huge 75% cover rate for the season. All the stats dominate the Mavs stats with this one. We also prefer the Warriors to go over their team total. As you can see, the stats are pointing us in this direction. Sure, it's not the widest gap, but as you can see, all stats in all categories are in favor of the over. Again, you could consider strengthening this one with different lines. The Mavericks' stats are the complete opposite, highly favorable for them to stay under their line. They have managed this in 77% of games against the Warriors, 60% for recent form and a decent 57% for this season's games. For the players, we went with Andrew Wiggins to have over 1.5 assists. His stats are looking strong for this one. We managed to get a little value on the odds, making this one worth the go. He has hit this in 8 of his last 9 games. He has also gone over in 10 of his 12 games against Dallas. He has also managed it in 3 of his last 4 away games. Next we had the Hawks and Blazers matchup. The game total is by far favorable to go over. The stats speak for themselves with this one, going over in every single matchup, and 73% of their games this season. The spread isn't looking as straightforward, with much more even stats. We do however prefer the Hawks line, yet we again would suggest looking into alternative lines for this one. As you probably guessed, the Hawks over team total is by far the better bet when considering stats. Sure, they have struggled in recent form but managed to go over in every single matchup in 70% of their season's games. It's a very similar situation she looking at the Blazers game total. Again, we prefer them to go over as they have in all matchups, and again it drops of when looking at recent form and season cover rate. I think I may look at alternatives with this one as well. Our last game is between the Lakers and Kings. The game totals is one I will be giving a miss. As you can see, it's very even between the two outcomes. You may be able to strengthen this, but it's still nothing I would consider. For the spread, looking at the stats, the Kings are slightly favored, covering in 73% of games between the two, but again the other categories are too close to call. Again, look at alternate lines when making any choice. We can say the same for the Lakers team total. Again, on my eyes, it's too close to call. They have managed to hit OER this line 60% of the time when looking at recent form, but it's not enough to consider a bet. We do prefer the Kings to go over their line. It's looking a lot more solid when comparing the stats. They managed to hit over in 73% of games against the Lakers, 60% for recent four, and 58% for the season. Again, we would probably look to strengthen this one as well. Our final pick is Domantas Sabonis, to have over 2.5 turnovers. His stats look solid for this one. He has managed this in 4 of his last 5 games. Also hit in 13 of his last 16 away games, while his matchups are 5 in his last 5 games against the Lakers. That's it for today, folks. Remember, stay safe and good luck with your bets. Please like and subscribe, and see you in the next one.